everyone, how are you doing? So to be perfectly frank, I have just been struggling so much to film and read the past few weeks. I mean, it's pretty easy to discern why, but even though I have this huge list of videos I want to film eventually that I'm constantly adding to, all of them just weren't clicking with me, and it took me a ridiculously long time to realise I should film this video. It's a pretty simple concept, as you've seen from the title, presumably 10 books to cheer you up, which is kind of exactly what I need right now and probably what a lot of you need right now. So I'm sitting here in a slightly extravagant dress for sitting around my house and pyjama bottoms because wouldn't want to like be too formal. My heated avocado for stomach cramps because that's also where we're at this month. And I'm just going to tell you about 10 books that I think have cheered me up and just might like provide you a little bit of escapism or a pick-me-up. Now, of course, books are wonderful and can provide all of those wonderful things that I just mentioned already. But at the same time, I'd really just like to iterate at this point in the video that if you are struggling right now, take care of yourself and please get in touch with a family member or a friend or a medical professional like your GP and tell them about what you're currently experiencing. Equally, there's lots of like public access resources. I'm not familiar with like phone lines in all the different countries that there are, but I will link below some resources for some of you that you may find helpful in the description box down below. And if you know of anything helpful in your particular country, feel free to leave it in the comments down below because somebody may also live there and may see your comment. But yeah, with that said, I'm just gonna carry on and tell you about 10 books that I think just might cheer you up because they cheered me up at one time or another. So first up, I'm gonna start with one that I read in 2020 and absolutely cheered me up at the time I was reading it, and that is Lumberjanes. So this is a comic book series and I've currently read the first 2 volumes, which collect together issues 1 to 8 or 10. I always forget whether a volume has 4 or 5 issues in it, but you get the idea. And what I think is nice about recommending this series to you at the point I'm at is that the first 2 volumes very much covers a whole story arc. So there are more issues that I do want to read, that I do plan on reading. I'm pretty sure they're all available on Scribd, which is an app that I use to read and listen to a lot of books. But at the same time, I got closure on one story arc at the end of volume 2, which I think is also really nice because it provides that excitement for the following issues but doesn't leave you frustrated. And this is just such a heartwarming, cheerful, fun, witty, endearing series. I'm not sure what the technical age category for this is, but I feel very much it could be middle grade because I think it could be read by children as well as adults. However, it does not lack appeal for adults. It still has charm, it still has mystery, it still has complexity, it still offers a layered and complex storyline even in the comic book form, which is perfectly possible both children's literature and comic books, but something I think maybe adults are a little fearful of missing out on in those genres. And it's about a group of young girls who are attending the Lumberjanes summer camp, which is a little bit like brownies or scouts, and they're learning to sort of live in the wilderness and build fires and friendship bracelets and bond over the summer, and it's adorable. But of course, there's a little more to the story than that, and in the very first issues we encounter some slightly mysterious, slightly paranormal, otherworldly secrets in the woods that our little gang get wrapped up in investigating. And like I said, it's super cute, but it's also very witty and charming. It's very inclusive. I know that as the series goes on, there's more and more representation in terms of LGBT relationships. I'm not sure exactly what form they take, but I know that that expands. And it's also just really nice to see this group of friends at a young age sort of growing together, and they're bonding and just having fun with one another. And I love it. I just think it's super adorable. I think the artwork is super cute and it's suitable for pretty much everybody, so would highly recommend that one. Another 2020 read for me was Mangoes and Mistletoes by Adriana Herrera, and this is a romance novella, so it's short and it's sweet and it's pretty upbeat. Excuse me for rhyming. It obviously has like a little bit of sort of drama and tension, as romance storylines typically do, because there has to be that moment where you're not quite certain if they're going to get together, even though you know they are, but the couple has to sort of overcome something. It's kind of like a necessary trope in the romance genre. So in that terms, you've got that little angle, but because it's so short as well, all of it's resolved quite quickly, and it's just super duper cute. It's contemporary, it's set in Edinburgh, and it follows two young women who are part of a cooking competition that pairs a professional chef with an amateur, but like an expert amateur, you know, like Great British Bake Off level amateur, someone that's still pretty good. And these two women end up developing feelings for one another, so it's also queer romance, which is definitely more difficult to find, and I know myself that I'm always looking for more FF romances, so you might be as well, and it's really nice to see that, and it's really nice to see a positive depiction of an FF romance. So yes, would recommend it in that respect as well. But it's also like cheerful and upbeat. It's about baking and cooking competitions and romance, and those are cute things. And I know people love a romance set in Scotland, which to me is just like so interesting, because I don't consider Scotland a particularly romantic place, but that's just because that's where I grew up, whereas from an outsider's perspective I think there's quite a romanticised view of it, so you might like it from that perspective as well. And our two main characters are also not from Scotland, so they are both of Dominican descent. One grew up in the Dominican Republic and the other one grew up in the US, so they also interact and discuss their culture and their different experiences of it throughout the book, and I thought that was really interesting little added to the storyline and the background. So I really enjoyed it. It was just like very quick, very cute. What else can I say, but it might put a smile on your face. I tried not to jump straight in with this author because I knew you would all see him coming, because anytime I do a video recommending like cheerful, happy, funny books, he makes an appearance. It is of course Terry Pratchett. In this instance I'm going to talk about The Wee Free Men. The Wee Free Men holds such a special place in my heart because it's very much the Terry Pratchett book that got me into Discworld. It wasn't the first Discworld book I read. I'd read Small Gods before that, but I think I was a little bit young, so I enjoyed Small Gods but very much didn't understand half the stuff that was happening, mainly because of the style and the prose and the fact that, like I said, I was a child and it was my first encounter with his work, whereas The Wee Free Men has a slightly more YA tone to it. It was specifically written for a slightly younger audience than most of Terry Pratchett's Discworld, but of course it's still enjoyed by fans of the series as a whole. It's just for that reason I think quite a good introduction if you already read a lot of middle grade and YA, or you've just never encountered Terry Pratchett before, or you're a child, I don't know, if you're looking to find the perfect Terry Pratchett book for a younger reader. And I love this book. On the topic of Scotland, one of my favourite aspects of this book is the sort of like parody of the like Scottish Highlander fairy folklore, because we have as some of the main characters the Wee Free Men, the title characters, who are Pictsies, so not pixies but Pictsies, and they're these little loud red-haired fairies that just cause absolute havoc, and they're so funny and I absolutely love them. And then they basically spend the novel helping our other main character, Tiffany Aching, retrieve her brother from the land of the fairies. So Tiffany Aching is a young witch whose brother is kidnapped by the Queen of the Fairies in very traditional folklore style, and has to go and save him with the help of the Wee Free Men. And it's just so funny. You don't need to have read any other Discworld books to read this one, because it's the start of its own series just set on this world that Terry Pratchett created, and it's just full of puns and wit and sarcasm and endearing characters and wonderful world building, so I couldn't recommend it more highly. One of the genres that always cheers me up though is historical romance, and you've probably garnered that by now from, again, some videos similar to this and my discovery of historical romance that happened a couple of years ago and then just completely changed my life because I'm in love with the genre. And I'm particularly drawn to the kind of 19th century historical romance novels that have a bit of humour in them. I love humour in my books, and I found that I'm really drawn to authors that include humour in this genre, and I've recommended Tessa Dare quite often because she does this a lot. So instead in this video I'm going to mention Susanna Craig, who's someone I only discovered last year, but I feel in tone she lives up to Tessa Dare, so if you're already a Tessa Dare fan then you'll probably enjoy Susanna Craig. And the book I read in 2020 by her even made it to my favourite books of the year, so it felt appropriate to to chuck it in here. And that is The Lady's Deception. Now I actually read this book when I was very much in the need of a bit of cheering up. I was in a bit of a reading slump and I ended up reading it in less than 24 hours. I just could not put it down. Everything else got pushed to the side and I just sat and read this book on my Kindle and fell completely in love with the main characters, their romance, and all of the side characters, to be honest. It's about a young English woman in the 19th century whose brother is trying to force her to marry a man that she doesn't want to marry. So she decides to seek out a lawyer to help her be emancipated from her brother early, because she's still not old enough to inherit the money that their father left to her. And this leads her to encountering a young Irish lawyer, because they're in Ireland, who's in search of a governess to take care of his two younger sisters. So she ends up in that role. It's all a bit of a misunderstanding, but you know, she manages to hide from her brother. She's now the governess to these two children, and obviously she falls in love with the young Irish lawyer, and it's a bit of a fun romp. There's the humour brought in part by the two younger sisters, who are an absolute riot, and also a very respectful development of a very endearing relationship. I think all too often in romances, the relationship is a little bit unhealthy, a little bit unequal, a little bit frustrating, and that was not true of this one for me, so it absolutely just completely cheered me up. Don't worry though, I know we're not all romance fans here, and that is all the romance covered for this video. To return to a more comical fantasy world again, I think I'm going to also recommend An Orc on the Wild Side by Tom Holt. So Tom Holt is another one of my favourite sort of comedic fantasy writers, and An Orc on the Wild Side is such a fun spoof of the fantasy genre in general. So this is very much set in a like Middle Earth type world that is sort of parallel to our own. And what Tom Holt does is he often sort of brings in very mundane modern day problems to a fantasy setting. So it's not purely fantastical world, he also brings in very much our own world. And in this case we have a lot of slightly upper middle class people moving to the countryside to buy up cheap property. But in this instance the countryside is Middle Earth, so we have a bunch of humans moving into our version of Middle Earth to buy up all this property and then realising it's a little bit strange here, what's going on? And at the same time, we have all of the magical creatures living in this world being influenced by our world, including the Goblin King, who has decided to slightly revamp his style of leadership to be known as new evil instead of traditional evil. And I think it's just a lot of fun, and also parodies a lot of like very popular fantasy books and worlds. So if you're into fantasy, you'll probably quite enjoy that. But it's also very much interacting with the 21st century. So I just think his books are a lot of fun, and again witty and full of puns, and would recommend to anyone that likes a bit of like comedy in their novels. If you really need a laugh though, I want to mention a book that I read years ago. I read this book for the first time when I was sitting my exams in my third year of university. So back in like 2013, quite a while ago now, and it is Weird Things Customers Say in Bookshops by Jen Campbell. So this book, again, quite special to me because I read this book before Jen and I were friends, and as you know now, Jen is like my absolute best friend in the whole wide world, and I miss her to pieces not living in the same city as her anymore. Just to reminisce slightly, it's also the reason Jen and I met, because she then got in touch with me over email and our friendship has grown ever since then. So that was lovely because I reviewed that book online and it absolutely cheered me up. Like, it was the stress relief I needed when I was feeling so anxious and stressed and frustrated studying for my exams, and it is just pure delight. It's easy to read because it's not a story, it's not a plot that you need to get involved in, it's non-fiction, just lots of little incidents of funny things and weird things people have said in bookshops. So I particularly would recommend it to those of you who are finding it difficult to concentrate at the moment, because you can dip in, you can dip out, or you can just consume the thing all at once, but you don't have to invest yourself into much of a complex storyline. In fact, no complex storyline at all. You just get to laugh out loud and think of all the like ridiculous situations that Jen as a bookseller found herself in. So would absolutely recommend this one if you need a bit of cheering up. But I do have one more graphic novel on this list though, and this one is definitely middle grade, but again very suitable for all ages, and that is The Tea Dragon Society by Katie O'Neill. Again, this one is just the most beautifully illustrated piece. Like, it is artwork. You could delete all the text and I would still recommend it. It's just beautiful. I want to print it all off and put it on my walls, partly because it's dragons, but also because they're the cutest dragons in the world. In fact, they are dragons that grow tea leaves from their head, like hair, and then you just trim off the tea leaves and make yourself herbal tea, and it gives you access to magical powers, and it's like the cutest thing ever. So this is just the most beautiful, imaginative, escapist little read, and it's the first in the series. I haven't actually read the sequels yet, but I'm really looking forward to when I get a chance. And I would say that for all of Katie O'Neill's work. I've read some of her other graphic novels as well, and they always put a smile on my face. They're also, again, super inclusive and diverse and just represent the most lovely relationships, friendships, like found families, have queer representation, all of these things, and you can just feel the love that Katie O'Neill as a writer and an illustrator has poured in to her work through the Tea Dragon Society. So if you just want to like experience that for yourself, then this is 100% the one to check out. I have 2 more books on my list though, and the next one is All Systems Red by Martha Wells. So this isn't one of those books which is just like chipper 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 all the way through, everybody's smiling, nothing dramatic or slightly dangerous happens. But I think it's just the most heartwarming, storyline, and the protagonist is one of the most relatable characters I've ever read, despite the fact that they aren't even a human. They're a cyborg, they're a cybernetic construct, I forget the exact word that's used, but they have organic parts. Although they've been built by this corporation, they also have organic material as part of their like building mechanics. So they're part robot, part organic, but they're very much not human. And they have been, like I said, constructed by this company who rents these bots out to missions travelling through space as a sort of line of defence. They are sort of like bodyguard robots, they're super strong, etc, etc. But our protagonist has hacked their mainframe and is now completely independent, but is trying to hide that. So they are still acting as if they are controlled by the corporation, but at the same time they just like to sit in their pod streaming basically soap operas and watching all of these TV show series, which is something, again, like I feel like so many of us can relate to. We just don't want anyone to talk to us, just leave us alone and let us watch our TV shows from beginning to end over and over again, because that's all we want to do. And that's exactly what this robot slash cyborg, what do you call it, whatever you want to call it, does. And I love it. I love their personality. I love their complete frustration with the human race, but then at the same time their very real feelings of protection towards their crew, but they still feel this compulsion to protect those around them because they realise that they're developing sort of attachment to them, real feelings. Even though they hate humans and find them very irritating, they still care about them, and it's like the cutest thing. This cyborg refers to itself as Murderbot, like nobody else knows it refers to itself as Murderbot, but the series itself is called the Murderbot Diaries, and I love Murderbot. They are the most relatable character. Again, like, I'm just repeating myself, but I absolutely love them, and I think so many of you would love them as well. This is sci-fi, it is set in space, so in that respect, kind of feels hard sci-fi, but also I think is very suitable for people who don't read a lot of sci-fi, because it feels like a character story. But lastly, I want to mention a middle grade novel, and that is Vote for Effie by Laura Wood. Now, this is actually one of the books that myself and my fellow judges shortlisted for the 2020 Blue Peter Children's Book Award, and that already tells you how much I love this book and how much I think this book has to offer. Again, it is middle grade, but I think anyone can read and enjoy it, although I really, really feel like it would benefit young people. Like, I feel like this is the kind of book I would have loved to read as a kid, that I think could really inspire lots of kids, and I just want to say that in case you know any kids in your life and could pass this along to them. But it's all about Effie Costas, who's the new girl at school. She and her family have just recently moved, and she's off to a new school and feels completely out of it. She feels like the oddball. She's a very precocious, very like confident in herself young woman who like knows what she likes and doesn't really like shy away from the spotlight, but at the same time struggles to necessarily make friends and sort of ingratiate herself with others, and she ends up running for school council. So of course the story of this book is basically all about how Effie and the friends that she makes fight to get onto school council, but at the same time it's not about that, because it's not about this end goal, it's not about winning this election, it's about the friends that Effie makes, it's about the wonderful like space they create for one another, it's about all the positive things that they promote within their school throughout this election, because they bring people's attention to things that they've never thought about before, and that I loved, because it just shows that whilst it's wonderful to fight to win a bigger campaign, it's not the be all and end all whether you win or lose. It's about sort of drawing attention to these issues in between, and all you can do and all you can do without necessarily thinking you have the power. Like, you don't need to be in charge to still do wonderful things, if that makes sense. And it's also about the community that they build, and about how they're all able to support one another as friends and encourage one another, and they all have different skills, and it's just so cute and lovely and positive, and like I said, would be such a wonderful book for more young people to read. But equally, I think you might enjoy it if you're still an adult just looking for something to uplift your spirit somewhat. And the messages very much go beyond the school environment. So those are the 10 books I figured might cheer you up if you're looking for something of that ilk. I'd love to know about any books that have cheered you up in the past or you think might cheer up others. But until next time, happy reading, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye everyone!